So the face-off between Moses Itauma and Filip Hrgovic has taken place, and there was great insight, so I want to give the boxing philosophy perspective. So let's open that door. I'm going to explore 11 ideas. So the first idea is that Hergovic told the world he isn't impressed by Moses Itauma. And the reason he gave is the exact thing Itauma can't disprove until round one. He's never seen Moses take a real punch, never seen him in a struggle, and never seen him in a dangerous situation. So let's explore this. So he's never seen Moses Itauma in danger, but that's because up to this point, Moses Itauma has been that good. I feel that Hergovic is displaying some Machiavellian tactics here. What he's doing, he's minimizing his opponent's achievements. And here is perhaps an anecdotal truth. In his teens, from what we've heard, Moses Itauma was beating up grown men. He was sensational in the gyms, in the boxing gyms. He has been, and I use this hip-hop figurative language, ringing bells for a very long time. So if Hergovic genuinely believes Moses Itauma is just a hype job, then unfortunately when the bell rings, he is going to be in real trouble. However, I'm assuming the reality is that he's trying to minimize Moses Itauma's achievements so that he can force some mistakes. Now, the next idea is that Itauma's answer wasn't, I have a great chin. It was, I'll hit him before he hits me. And again, that's not a defense of his chin. It's a refusal to test it. And that leads to an interesting question. How good or how bad is Moses Itauma's chin? How good is it from 1 to 10, 1 to 100, etc.? But how good is Hergovic's chin? Hergovic, when he fought Daniel Dubois, he took some big shots. He took jabs, he took left hooks, he took overhand rights. He took some very heavy shots. And Daniel Dubois is a big puncher. He's the only man, for example, to stop Jerome Miller and the only man to stop Fabio Wardley. He punches very hard. Daniel Dubois has a vicious jab. I believe some people say it's like a Sonny Liston jab. And Hergovic took those punches. And this is the important distinction. He was stopped, but he was stopped on his feet. That's a very important distinction. He took big punches from Zhang, who is a massive southpaw, who has very strong power. Look at the Joe Joyce boxing match for reference. So all the evidence indicates that when we talk about Filip Hrgovic and when we talk about chins from 1 to 10 or 1 to 100, if we're talking about 1 to 10, if it's not a 10 and it's at least a 9, it's very high. He's taken very hard punches from lots of different type of opponents. And just while we're on the topic, who has the best chins in boxing? You know, when I think of the best chins, I think of a variety of people. Marvelous Hagler, what an amazing chin he had. Check out the Thomas Hearns fight. Oliver McCall, many people talk about Oliver McCall and how incredible his chin was. Triple G, unbelievable chin. James Toney, underrated because he was a defensive genius in the boxing ring. So he was good at slipping the punches and taking the power off the punches, but he also had a great chin. David Tua, again, another underestimated candidate. Of course, Muhammad Ali. He took 8 rounds of punishment from a prime George Foreman, which was absolutely unbelievable. George Foreman can really punch. Check out the Joe Frazier fight to validate that. Carl Froch, great British champion, great chin. Roberto Duran, another amazing fighter with an amazing chin. And also Canelo Alvarez. He has a great chin. I can't remember when Canelo has been hurt. His chin is that strong. And let's tie it back to Moses Itauma. How good is Moses Itauma's chin? Well, the truth is that we, the boxing public, we don't know how good his chin is. But hopefully, if the Hergovic fight is competitive, we'll be able to get an answer to that question. So the next idea is that Hergovic's entire case rests on one word: experience. 4 English fighters in a row. 4 English fighters in a row. Let's break it down. Joe Joyce. And that was like a last-minute replacement, I believe. Adelaide, Allen, and now Moses Itauma. He looked good against Dave Allen. He really went in there and just, really put the pressure on Dave Allen. And we all liked Dave Allen. We wanted him to win, but he did a job. The David Adelaide fight was an interesting fight. He got hit with some really strong counter jabs and counter left hooks, but he persevered and he dominated the fight with regards to winning the rounds. Here's an important question. How important is experience? How important is it? Now, when Sugar Ray Leonard beat Marvin Hagler, you could argue that his experience and ring IQ was significant. He had the movement, but also he had those last 30-second flurries that would steal the rounds. That was experience. And of course, Marvin Hagler had experience as well and was a great fighter. Both were experienced and great fighters, but Sugar Ray made, in that fight, better adjustments. And that was part of his experience and ring IQ. When we look at when Evander Holyfield fought Mike Tyson, that was an absolute masterclass. We had the dominant position against Mike Tyson, so taking a dominant position, we had elite counterpunching in that fight. Evander Holyfield's counterpunching was elite. Whether it was the right-hand counter, the left-hand counter, it was absolutely elite. You had the control in the pocket, so he controlled the action in the pocket, either when it was in the clinch or when they were fighting up close. And then you had the tempo control. Again, he would use the clinch to slow down the pace or use the jab to control the pace. So you had that experience and that ring IQ. So experience is important. And this is where Hergovic has an advantage. But can he make that advantage count? Because there's the important relationship. It's whether the experience that you have translates into boxing IQ. And I guess only time will tell. And then the next idea is that Moses Itauma's counter here is ruthless. It's not about how long you've been doing it. It's how well you've been doing it. Sounds like a hip hop lyric. And there is some truth to that. Many feel in the industry, in the boxing industry, particularly in the British context, that Moses is not just good. He's not just very good. He's elite. But then that leads the question is how good is Hergovic? Or how good will Hergovic be on the night? Hergovic has shown glimpses that he can be good, but how good will he be on the night? And there are some question marks, particularly in the Dave Allen fight when he didn't turn up with Abel Sanchez. That is a red flag. If Moses Itauma starts landing the southpaw jab, if he starts feinting effectively, and if he cuts Hergovic, and if he starts going through those phases of attack, when he goes from phase 1, phase 2, phase 3, and there's no counter, then let me tell you this, Hergovic is in big, big trouble. And this question is important. How good is Filip Hrgovic? And it may not even be how good. It may be how good is Filip Hrgovic at adapting to Moses Itauma. Is he able to make the necessary adjustments? Has Hergovic ever dealt with someone as refined as Moses Itauma? Of course, you can reverse that question. Has Moses Itauma ever dealt with someone as refined as Hergovic? But I feel that Hergovic is going to have to show something different. And it's very interesting. So then the next idea is the no props exchange. And in a microcosm, Hergovic, it's almost like he's refusing to validate Itauma. And Moses Itauma seems to demand it. I feel like Moses Itauma is big on respect. Like he doesn't talk much, but he wants to get his respect. There's some interesting psychology there. Of course, the minimization is a tactic. It's Machiavellian. And I guess the impact of the tactic is to try to draw out a mistake. Is to try and, this is an assumption, but if you minimize an opponent's achievements and they become overeager, maybe you can force them onto a counter. Additionally, minimization can be a psychological coping mechanism because you're thinking, well, I'm going to win the fight because this person isn't that great. He's just marketing. He's not really that good. So I guess you could argue it's multifaceted. But I believe that Filip Hrgovic needs to be the best version of himself to win. I think that is objectively true. What needs to be on point for Filip Hrgovic? Well, he needs that jab. He has a really good jab, and he needs to be utilizing it. And that's going to be difficult against the southpaw. The backhand needs to come. He's so natural with the 1-2. And if he can bring that into the play without being countered, that gives him a chance. And also he has this nice left hook to the body. But interestingly, the left hook to the body might be a hard punch to land against a southpaw unless he changes the angle. Additionally, he might have to change that left hook to the body for a right hook to the body. He might have to set it up intelligently. He might have to start with the left hook to the head and then go with that right hook to the body. But the body shots could be a good investment. And also, Filip Hrgovic mostly brings a pace, a really good pace. And I think it would be advantageous if he's able to bring that pace, because if he's able to implement a pace, that's going to be a puzzle that Moses Itauma is not used to dealing with. And I think in the David Adelaide fight, he set a blistering pace. So if he's able to replicate that type of volume, it'll be interesting to see how Moses Itauma will deal with that. And then the next idea is that Hergovic's honesty cuts both ways. He admits the Dubois loss took him a year to recover from. That's a significant period of time. Injured, sick. He wasn't himself. Now, here's a question. Has Hergovic ever given Daniel Dubois credit for that victory? I don't think I've seen one interview where he's given any element of credit. Is that a good thing? Is that a bad thing? It appears that when he speaks about that loss, he speaks about the illness, but he doesn't speak about Daniel Dubois' performance. And to me, that's concerning, because can a lack of accountability be an issue? And if Abel Sanchez is not in his camp, or he's having a poor camp, has he already got another excuse? I think accountability is really important. And when someone is making excuses, then that's an issue. Now, I'm not saying he wasn't sick, but that's not Daniel Dubois' fault. I mean, Filip Hrgovic entered that fight very confident. He set a blistering pace. He hit Daniel Dubois with about 30 right hands. Go back and watch that fight. He hit him with backhand after backhand after backhand, and Daniel Dubois just took it, made some adjustments, came on in the middle rounds, and then really started to assert dominance at the end. But Hergovic was extremely confident in that fight. And I understand that his illness would have been a factor, but to totally minimize or not give Daniel Dubois any credit, that to me is a red flag about someone's personality. Because maybe the more accurate picture is to state that yes, he was confident. Yes, he had that previous experience with Daniel Dubois of allegedly beating him up in sparring. And yes, there were some preparation issues. And you can acknowledge all of those things and say, yes, I had some health issues. But you can also give your opponent credit. You can give your opponent credit for taking the punches. You can give your opponent credit for, able to endure the punishment. You can acknowledge that there was issues in preparation and still give your opponent credit. So to me, that's a bit of a red flag. And then the next issue is Itauma's team-based answer is quietly the smartest thing said, oppressor. I have ears that listen, I believe was the quote. What are those ears hearing? What are they hearing? For me, an important part of this is how is Hrgovic's preparation going? How is Filip Hrgovic doing in preparation? Is he looking sensational? Is he struggling? Does he have a defensive remedy for the cut issue that has come up? I don't want to say time and time again, but it's been prominent in certain fights. It was prominent in the Daniel Dubois fight, and it was prominent in the Joe Joyce fight. So what's happening? And does he have a trainer? Is Abel Sanchez in the corner? Is Abel Sanchez the one devising the plan, devising the elite boxing environment, or is he doing it individually? Because I think those questions are crucial. It's really important that Filip Hrgovic comes in optimum, and he's only going to come in optimum if he's having great preparation. And I get this feeling that he might not be having great preparation. I had this feeling against Spence when he fought Tim Tszyu. And I released a video on the day of the fight expressing that, because he kept saying about how his body was worn, his body was broken, that initially he couldn't do 6 rounds. And I was like, this sounds like he's had a really bad camp. So it's going to be interesting to, clearly, you would expect Filip Hrgovic not to acknowledge if he's had a bad camp, but he might say things that might imply that the camp has been far from optimal. So it's important to look for clues. So when Moses Itauma is saying about I have ears, what is he being told? I mean, the worst thing would be if he's been told that Filip Hrgovic is getting beaten up or knocked down. I pretty much doubt that that's happening. But there's a question mark with regards to the preparation. Of course, Moses Itauma needs to have elite preparation as well. It would appear from the outside looking in that he's a very highly conditioned athlete, and he takes the craft very seriously, and he speaks to his actions, not through his words. But that doesn't mean you can't have a bad camp. So there's some interesting things going on there. And then the next idea is that Hergovic says, I've never seen him struggle, carrying a hidden confession about his own journey. He's from Croatia. He's from Croatia, a man with it, coming from a country where there's no boxing on the map. And I say that respectively, respect to Croatia, but it doesn't have, from my understanding, a huge boxing track record. And he can be proud of that, because obviously the road for Filip Hrgovic has been hard. But there's an important distinction to make here. Just because you have not seen someone struggle does not mean that they can't overcome struggle. And before that, we need to define struggle. I'm pretty sure that Moses Itauma has had challenges in sparring, challenges in preparation. And so far, he's ticked the boxes. He could have had challenges against Dillian Whyte. But again, when he's come up against more experienced opposition, he's passed the test with flying colours. And Moses Itauma, when you look at him, and when you look at him talk, and when you look at him train, and when you look at him perform, he seems to be a strong individual. He seems to be mentally strong. I don't look at Moses Itauma and get a feeling that he's mentally weak. So the assertion that he can't cope with struggle, we don't have the answer to that yet. Hergovic, I would say, is mentally strong. A genuine question would be, what is Moses Itauma's mental strength from 1 to 10? What is Hergovic's mental strength from 1 to 10? He was mentally strong to endure the situation against Zhang. He was mentally strong to endure the situation against Daniel Dubois. But that doesn't mean that he will necessarily endure it again. So the mental toughness of both fighters, I believe, will be potentially tested here. And then the next idea is, if I was British, you would be boxing on my undercard. And this was like the most cutting line of the face-off. And Hergovic, he's Machiavellian. I like it. He's framing Moses Itauma's, he's got this narrative bias of framing Moses Itauma's Italian Friars as like a product of Great Britain's promotional machine. So it's like Moses Itauma, him growing exponentially as part of the promotional machine, as opposed to it being part of his talent. And I like the fact that Hergovic has created this narrative bias. And again, he's just playing these subtle mind games. Maybe, apart from being Machiavellian, maybe he feels genuinely angry about this. Maybe he feels that, okay, you've been given that opportunity, but I haven't been given that opportunity. And you've been privileged because you're British. Maybe he genuinely feels that way. But here's a counter argument. Here's playing devil's advocate. Moses Itauma is a machine because he's developed an elite reputation. People didn't give Moses Itauma his reputation. He earned it. And he earned it because of what he's been doing in the gyms and what he's been doing in the ring. To give an example, someone who graduates from Oxford, a premium university, they've earned their position. They got there by merit. They got there because of a system of meritocracy. They weren't simply just put there because of privilege. And then the next idea is that both men agree on one thing without realizing it. The truth lives in the four corners, and the truth shall prevail. Moses Itauma states it's the four corners of truth. And this is interesting because this fight has now progressed into an IBF title fight. What does that do? It adds more pressure, but it also adds more prestige. If Moses Itauma wins, he becomes one of the youngest champions in history. What an accolade. Mike Tyson, I believe, was the youngest champion. But if Moses Itauma is victorious, he becomes the second youngest champion. So history will be made. Victory opens not just the door of credibility, but it also opens that championship door. And that's a huge door to open. So the stakes have now elevated. The stakes are now higher. This isn't just another fighter on the road to the title. This is for the title. And that changes the context of the fight. And then the last idea is that the closing prediction is the only moment they meet in the middle. Itauma states he will win. Hergovic states, I'm going to beat this guy. And in a sense, it's like there's this projection of no respect, no props. Of course, both men have to believe that. Why? Imagine going into a fight not believing you're going to win. That's probably not going to turn out well. So you have to have that psychological belief, because in a fight, you're going to go through tough times, and you have to have that vision. You have to have that positivity, that belief in yourself to be able to persevere. The preparation will reveal a massive part of that truth. I wonder, and I do wonder, and I wonder with any fight, but with this one, is any fighter dealing with either minor or major injuries? Because that can be a significant factor. Is Hergovic training with Abel Sanchez? That is such an important question. And how does Hergovic deal with that southpaw style? That's a revealing question. How does he deal with that elite timing and that elite feet? When it comes to sparring, this is going to be so essential for Filip Hrgovic. His team needs to get great sparring. And Moses Itauma, a part of Moses Itauma's greatness is his feet. He might have the best feet in the heavyweight division, and that's with Usyk included. I know that's a bold claim, but the point that I'm trying to make here is that Moses Itauma's footwork is of a very high standard. And the final truth, where is it? Well, of course, that exists in the ring. But the shaping of that truth, the shaping of that final truth, that exists in preparation. So before we finish off, let's go through these 8 questions. So the first question is, has Itauma avoided adversity because he is exceptional or because he remains untested? I think in the ring, Moses Itauma has shown exceptional capabilities. He's shown exceptional timing, and he's shown the ability to finish his opponents. He's shown that his footwork is second to none, and it's been alleged that the building of Moses Itauma in the gyms, in the British gyms, has been absolutely exceptional. Question number 2, is Itauma's hit him first response confidence or an unanswered question about his chin? Does Moses Itauma have questions about his chin? Every boxer has a question about their chin. I would assume it's a natural question. How good is your chin? I'm assuming Moses Itauma has been hit hard in sparring, and only he knows how he's taken those punches. Is there a difference between taking punches in sparring and taking punches under the bright lights? And anyone, even a fighter like Marvelous Hagler, can be knocked out if they're caught with the right punch, so to speak. I'm not sure. There's nothing to indicate that Moses Itauma is vulnerable in this area, but because his defense has been elite, there's nothing to indicate that he has an exceptional shin, or he has an exceptional chin because he hasn't had to show it. Question 3. Can Hergovic turn his experience advantage into control inside the ring? Potentially, but it depends how he deals with the southpaw position and the footwork. he has an amateur background. He has a good amateur background. So maybe he can bring something to the table that can test Moses Itauma, because if he can, he won't be able to match him for footwork. But if he can deal with Moses Itauma's footwork and deal with that timing through experience, then we're going to have a very interesting matchup. Question number 4, is Itauma right that quality matters more than years of experience? I think both matter. Years of experience matter because you're processing more information, but the quality of that experience matters as well. I guess I'm trying to think of an example. If you train incorrectly for years, you will make less progress. But does it mean that objectively, that training experience doesn't matter? I guess you could argue that it matters, but it doesn't matter as much as someone who is implementing a plan efficiently. So, in a sense, I guess the quality is essential, but also the quantity is essential. Question number 5, can Hergovic's refusal to respect Itauma provoke a costly mistake? If Moses Itauma is frustrated and he overreaches, then perhaps that gives Filip Hrgovic a counterpunch opportunity. But Filip Hrgovic, to my knowledge, is not an exceptional counterpuncher. Perhaps this is a personality thing. Perhaps it's just an alpha male dominance thing. I think he's irritating Moses Itauma. But in a sense, different boxers react differently. You irritate some boxers will make more mistakes. You irritate other boxers, and they will fight even more effectively. So I guess this is a test. Is Moses Itauma irritated, and does that hinder or improve his performance? Only time will tell. The 6th question, does Hergovic's explanation for the Dubois loss reveal valid context or a lack of accountability? Maybe it reveals both. If you're ill before a fight, then that's going to hurt you. But let's reveal the true context here. A lot of boxers go into matches maybe unwell or maybe with small injuries. So that's an objective reality of boxing. However, to indicate that an illness wouldn't hurt your performance or potentially hinder your performance, that would be objectively untrue. But when you only focus on the illness and you don't focus on the strengths of your opponent, or that your opponent had any strengths, and you don't give them any credit, I think then we cross into the lane of lacking accountability. Because in one sense, you are accountable for bringing the best version of yourself. It wasn't Daniel Dubois' fault that you came into the fight with quote unquote an illness or not well, or 80% or 70%, etc. Question number 7, is Moses Itauma's team hearing weaknesses in Hergovic's preparation that the public cannot see? Potentially. It's funny because it's hard to get that inside scoop about what's happening in preparation. But Moses Itauma's team, if we know anything about Moses Itauma's team, they're analytical. So if there are negative reports that are happening in the camp, then it's possible that they're getting those reports. Here's a counter argument though, and I'm not sure how common this is, but you could put out fake reports that your preparation isn't going well to try and mess with your opponent psychologically. So it's important to understand that you might be getting information, but is that information true? So I think it's kind of dangerous for a boxer to feed too much into that information. Objectively, the best way to prepare for an opponent is to prepare for the best version of that opponent. You shouldn't prepare as if they're injured or have a small injury, or if they're going to have some type of handicap, because that might not be the version that you're going to get. And then the final question is this fight about winning or proving the other man's entire narrative wrong? I guess in the end, it is about winning, but others would argue it's the way you win. Here's a good example. If Moses Itauma wins by disqualification, I think a lot of people would feel that that's not the type of victory that they want. I don't think that's the type of victory that Moses Itauma would want. But equally, If he wins a hard-fought 12-round battle, that will answer some questions. It would answer some questions about his punch durability. Can he take a punch to the chin? Can he take a punch to the body? It will answer some questions about his adaptability, not his adaptability in the early parts of the fight, but his adaptability in the middle rounds and in the later rounds. And it will also answer some questions about Filip Hrgovic's preparation. Did he come in at 70%, 80%, 90%, 100%, etc.? So I guess winning is the end result. And winning is important, but the process can define the context or the objective reality of that victory. And of course, both fighters are looking for victory. So that's the end of the video. Now I'm trying to build a digital boxing community, and that means I'm interested in your thoughts, I'm interested in your perspectives, and I'm interested in your observations. Now, if you want to support the channel, press like, hype, and subscribe. And if you want to watch more content like this, then simply click here or click here. As always, thanks for your time. It is much appreciated.